Hello my spooky bitches, my name is Shannon Green and welcome to my spooky season series. This series will go on throughout October. Each episode is going to be somewhat Halloween related. Not every episode is going to necessarily be taking place on Halloween, but it's going to have like Halloween elements to it. So today's case has all of the elements to make an incredibly creepy and downright terrifying movie. There's actually been movies that have been made previously that are very similar to today's case. This case involves deception, abuse, 2 exorcisms and paranormal activity. Before I dive in, I just want to say that if, like me, you are interested in true crime and for some strange reason you like the sound of my voice, then please click the subscribe button because I am here for you guys every single week. So let's dive in. This week's case is about the exorcism of Anna Ecklund. Anna Ecklund wasn't actually her name. Allegedly, her real name was Emma Schmidt. So this story certainly isn't for the faint-hearted at all. I think we all like to believe that exorcisms, demon possession and paranormal activity are just fictitious stories which tend to make up the majority of really good and sometimes really shit horror movies. But for some, it is a reality. You may not like to believe that you or anyone else can or has actually become possessed by a demon, but some people have. And Anna Ecklund was no exception. The details about Anna Ecklund's early life are somewhat blurry because this took place so long ago, over a century ago. So I won't be able to give you a lot of facts about her early life. So it is said that Anna Ecklund was born around 1882 in Wisconsin. Anna was born to Jacob Ecklund. I'm not too sure of what Anna's mother's name was, but I do know that her mother wasn't present in the majority of Anna's life. She left Anna at a very young age for reasons unknown. Anna was a practicing and devout Catholic, which Jacob was not very happy about. I'm not too sure where Anna's devotion and love for religion actually stemmed from. Maybe it stemmed from her mother, but Jacob was not religious at all, and it infuriated him that Anna was so religious. Anna would attend church several times a week. She absolutely loved to go to church. It was her weekly routine. So for the first 14 years of Anna's life, she lived a somewhat normal life. Not so normal with her father because he was an abusive drunk, but her personality was somewhat normal. You know, she was a typical child. She did well in school. Obviously, she was also very religious. She had friends. She was into the same kind of stuff that a young girl was into at that time, I guess. Jacob was a very difficult man. He was, like I said, he was a drunk, he was abusive, and he would constantly mock Anna's love for the church. He was just so against it. And at any given opportunity, he would belittle Anna and make her feel bad about being religious, which if that's the path she chose to go down, you should support that. It's like, I'm not necessarily a religious person. I definitely consider myself to be more spiritual than religious. But if my son grew up and decided that he wanted to take a more religious path, I would fully support that, even though that's not necessarily my beliefs. My son doesn't need to have the same beliefs as me. And if he was so passionate about it, I would support that and encourage it. And I'd be really happy that he was so passionate about something. So that just makes him a shitty person in my eyes. And he gets shittier as well. The more we go into this story, the more you will realise that Jacob Ecklund was an absolute scumbag. It's unknown exactly when, but obviously whilst Anna was a child, Jacob began having a relationship with no other than his ex-wife's sister, Anna's aunt, Mina. Now, Mina was a difficult character in her own right. She had a very colourful background, and she was well known for practicing witchcraft and black magic. I'm not sure about how Anna and Mina got along, but judging by what I'm going to tell you later on, I think we will probably all agree that they didn't have a great relationship, and that Mina, like Jacob, was also a scumbag. So you can all come to your own conclusion when we get into it a little bit later on. So at some point between Anna's 10th and 14th birthday, Jacob decided that he was going to try to pressure Anna into engaging in an incestuous relationship, to which Anna flatly refused multiple times. Jacob, however, did not give up. He was adamant on, well, not adamant, he was hell-bent on pursuing his own daughter. See what I mean? Scumbag. Anna and Jacob already had such a complicated relationship. He was not an affectionate man. He belittled Anna at any given opportunity. He would always just make her feel shit and just dismiss her. You know, he wasn't the kind of father to give her a hug every time she come home from school or praise her for doing something good. He just mentally and emotionally, he was not present at all. And any time that he felt like Anna did do something wrong, he would abuse Anna. So he just was not a good father at all. So as you can imagine, they did have an incredibly complicated relationship. And it only got worse once Jacob began to coerce Anna into having an incestuous relationship. And every single time Anna would shut him down. So the tension just built up in their relationship, which soon spiraled into a very dark place. So once Anna reached 14, Anna began to act quite differently. The girl who was once outgoing and happy and loving soon become very withdrawn and angry, and people just couldn't figure out why. The girl who once loved going to church so much so that she attended several times a week suddenly stopped going to church. And each time she was questioned on why she didn't attend church, she was told that she was just unable to attend. Anna's behaviour just started to become more and more erratic. She also began to get quite sexual as well, constantly making sexual references, but quite advanced sexual references. You know, for a 14-year-old girl, she would mention things that no 14-year-old should really know about. And obviously what we need to remember, you didn't have the internet back in those days, you did not have porn or anything like that. So the kinds of things that she knew about most people didn't know about, and a lot of people found it to be quite odd. So anytime Anna would attempt to attend the church or any kind of religious building, something would stop her, like a magnetic force. Like, she would attempt to go in there and she wouldn't be able to. She would just stop dead in front of this building and start to shake, sometimes even convulse. It's quite strange. You know, she loved going to the church, and all of a sudden her body wasn't even allowing her to attend. So rumours began to circulate. This was a very tight-knit community, and people began to feel quite threatened by Anna. This happy-go-lucky young girl had now turned into a sexual angry deviant, and people were scared of her, and rumours began to circulate, and people started to believe that maybe Anna had become possessed by a demon. Because in those days, what other kind of explanation is there? So her behaviour was deemed as a form of possession. And in 1908, Father Theophilus Reisinger, he was called in to perform an exorcism on Anna. Father Reisinger come in to perform the exorcism. I'm not sure how long it went for. I think it went on for quite a while, but it was deemed successful on June 18th, 1908. And Anna was okay to go back out into the world. She suddenly felt fine. She felt okay now. She seemed like she was back to her normal self. She was able to attend church. The sexual deviant behaviour seemed to have vanished. And Anna went on to live a normal life for a while. Didn't last long. So at some point, it's obviously, we're not sure when, in Anna's adult life, that her father sadly passed away. And it was shortly after that Anna was finding it quite difficult to practice her religion again. She again started displaying the same kind of behaviour that she displayed when she was deemed possessed. And it was this time that her behaviour and her actions against her faith really stepped it up a gear. She found herself lashing out multiple times against her spiritual counsellor. She would attack him on numerous occasions, and even at one point she actually attempted to suffocate him as well. Her behaviour when she was possessed previously had come back. Anna had become very, very angry, more so than what she was previously. She began gaining compulsive urges to destroy all of her religious symbols. She was again unable to attend any kind of religious building, and she started to hear voices that were telling Anna to do bad stuff. She then decided to go and seek some professional help from doctors and psychiatrists, and they all deemed her as being physically fit. And several years after of this behaviour just getting worse and worse, the voices becoming more and more regular, Anna decided to enlist the help of the church. So once Anna is in the care of the church members, they try to help Anna. They try to diagnose her and alleviate her, but they just fail miserably, because there was nothing wrong with Anna other than the fact that she was obviously possessed for the second time. And she was only getting worse. She was getting more aggressive, more volatile, and more dismissive of religion. It soon became quite clear that Anna was, well, could speak Latin. She understood Latin and she could speak Latin, and she could also speak quite a few other languages as well, which was quite strange because Anna had never been taught these languages. She had never spoken them before up until recently, so this was quite odd. She was also able to sense when there was anything that was blessed, anything that contained holy water, and anytime it was brought near her, she would just flip out. She would kick off, she would try and attack anyone who brought her these items. So whilst the priests were caring for Anna, they soon began to suspect that supernatural forces were at play here, and that there wasn't anything actually physically wrong with her. She wasn't unwell, she was just possessed. Finally, in 1928, priests realised that there was nothing else that they could do, and they decided that they needed to contact Father Reisinger again so that he could perform yet another exorcism on Anna. It was agreed upon by Father Reisinger that they were going to, himself and Anna were going to go to a specific convent in Erlin where he would perform the exorcism. It was particularly quite far out, and he was very insistent that it needed to be in like a remote location so that no one was kind of aware of what was going on and that there was no interference. So Anna actually travelled to this convent by the train by herself, and Father Reisinger was going to meet her there. Father Reisinger also realised that he needed some help this time. Upon observing Anna, he realised that there could potentially have been more demons possessing Anna than just one. She was a lot worse than the previous time. So he realised he needed some help. This is when he enforced Father Steiger to come and help as well. Father Steiger and Father Reisinger were supposed to meet, and then they were going to drive in Father Steiger's car to the convent. So upon Father Reisinger waiting for Steiger, whose car allegedly had zero problems beforehand, it had broken down. There was some kind of issue with the car whilst he was en route to pick up Father Reisinger, and this just freaked him out. Father Reisinger was surprisingly quite calm about it, but Father Steiger just sort of thought that there were supernatural forces at play and they were trying to prevent him from going to help Anna, so it freaked him out quite a huge amount. Anna arrived to the convent first, and once she got there she was welcomed by some of the priests there, and as soon as they welcomed her upon her arrival, she lashed out and choked them. And shortly afterwards, I think much to the priest's relief, Father Reisinger arrived. So the day that Anna, Father Steiger and Father Reisinger all arrived, this was the 17th of August, and the exorcism was going to commence the very next day. On the 17th, they all arrive and they get Anna settled into her room. And this is when they realise that Anna's behaviour is far worse than they had previously thought. She began purring like a cat. She would not eat any food that had holy water on it, and one nun presented her with the food that had been blessed, and Anna just freaked out. She seemed to know what food had been blessed and what food hadn't, and she just refused to eat altogether. And then Anna began howling like a wild animal, which would last for hours. So as you can imagine, everyone within the convent were absolutely terrified of Anna. They didn't want to go near her. They didn't want to approach her at all, because when they did, she would just attack them. She would try to kill them. And if she weren't trying to kill them, she was hurling abuse at them. And yeah, I don't know why they didn't just up and leave. I personally would have. But they stuck it out. So fair play to them. So on the 18th of August in the morning, the exorcism began. As soon as the exorcism began, Father Reisinger realised that this was going to take quite a while. It wasn't just going to be a few hours. I don't necessarily know how long exorcisms last generally, but Father Reisinger knew that it was going to take much longer than I guess they usually happen. And he comes to the conclusion that it was going to last for about 8 days, which I'm guessing is a really long time for an exorcism. So to perform the exorcism, I'm sure some of you know from films and all that, she had to be tied to the bed so that she couldn't move, because obviously, as we know, Anna was very aggressive, and whatever demon was inside her, obviously they did not want this to be happening. They wanted to fully have control over Anna's body, and Reisinger was trying to do the exact opposite. He was trying to release this demon. So Anna was convulsing, she was throwing up, and throughout the duration of the exorcism, Anna was not eating at all. She wouldn't eat, she wouldn't drink, and she was like throwing up so much, especially considering she hadn't eaten and she was weeing and everything else. Everything was coming out of her, and it was much more than a normal human amount, which I can imagine that was very strange to witness. So the first episode lasted for about 8 days until the 26th of August. As soon as Reisinger began to recite the names of the Holy Trinity, that was when Anna actually leapt off of the bed. What we need to remember is she was probably quite tightly tied to the bed, but and she you know, she should have been quite frail and weak because she hadn't been eating for about 8 days, but she still managed to conjure up the strength to force herself out of the bed, force herself out of these ties, and just leap off of the bed. Once she leapt off of the bed, she threw herself sideways onto the wall, which obviously is not humanly possible. And all of the nuns and the priests, bless them, they tried their hardest to pry Anna off of the wall, but she had like superhuman strength, so it took a lot of them to try to pull her down, and they did eventually. So once they managed to pry Anna off of the wall, the exorcism continues, and Anna is laid back on the bed, tied very tightly. And whilst the exorcism is going on, with Anna's lips completely unmoved, she starts speaking in several different languages, one of them being Latin. And when she spoke, it wasn't Anna's voice. It was like in growls and demonic murmurings. During these bursts of speeches, it is when Reisinger actually learns of the details of the demonic presences that are within Anna. Anna was actually possessed by not one demon, but 5. And the 5 are as follows. One of them being her very own father, Jacob, her aunt / stepmother, Mina, along with Beelzebub, Judas, and Lucifer himself. And among the 5 were scores of other lesser known demons that would kind of like reside in packs, and they would squeal and growl like on top of each other when they spoke. As the exorcism continued, Anna just grew weaker and weaker, and Reisinger thought that what he feared for Anna's life. He felt like she wasn't going to make it through this exorcism. But he was determined. I think Reisinger kind of grew a connection with Anna. You know, he had been through this with Anna before, and I think he really did sympathise with her, and that increased his determination to help Anna and get through this. On the 26th of August, Reisinger determines that they should conclude the exorcism for now, and they will resume in like a few days or a few weeks, depending on Anna's state. So he ends his exorcism, his speech, and as soon as he does, Anna's eyes open and he can very much see that it is Anna again. However, she is still possessed at this point. The exorcism had concluded, and they decided to resume it on the 20th of September. But during all of this third exorcism, each time Steiger was in the room, Anna would always direct her anger towards Steiger, and he was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. And he began to like fear for his life. Each night he would hear Lucifer speaking to him and trying to turn him against Reisinger. And he was just being tortured continuously. And he just wanted out. Him and Reisinger began to argue quite frequently because he just did not want to be involved anymore. But Reisinger was just determined. He wanted to get rid of these demons. He wanted to help Anna, and he was determined to do so. And he needed Steiger's help. He couldn't do it alone because Anna wasn't possessed by just one demon anymore. It was 5, and she was becoming weaker and weaker, and her behaviour was just getting more and more volatile. And like I said, it was getting more directed at Steiger. So upon all of these arguments, Steiger did decide to carry on, because I think he was quite heavily influenced by Reisinger's determination, and he was impressed, but he was also very, very fearful of his own life. I wouldn't have blamed him if he wanted out and just left, because I absolutely would have been out of there from the get-go. The second she leapt out of that bed and just leapt against the wall and stayed there, I would have been out of there. But he decided to stay, and I'm sure we can all praise him for that. All of them. I don't know how they did it, because that sounds fucking terrifying. Finally, on the 15th of December 1928, the group had begun what would become the third and final session of the exorcisms during the time in the convent. And as was usual, the foul smell, the growls and the insults just continued as normal. For like 24 hours, they battled with the demonic entities. Steiger finally decided he couldn't do it anymore. He didn't want to be there for the final session, so he was out of there. I don't know if he actually left the convent or he just was not in the room when it was happening, but he did not want to be a part of it at all, and I do not blame him for that. So by this exorcism, all of the lesser known demons, they had been gone at this point, so it was just the 5 that needed to be rid of. So for 3 days, Reisinger just did not stop. He was just continuously trying to exorcise these demons away. And by this point, I can imagine he was just absolutely exhausted. So finally, on the 22nd of December, Reisinger commenced his what would become the final exorcism. Reisinger commanded the demons to hell, And he actually stated that he could see Lucifer and Beelzebub themselves in the corner when this was happening, which is just terrifying. But by this point, he stated that while seeing them, he could see that they were seething with rage, unable to actually insult Risinger. So they were becoming weaker and weaker, and Anna was slowly going back to her self. As the exorcism was coming to an end, the room shook and rumbled with a vast energy, and just before it fell silent, Anna collapsed back onto the bed, and she opened her eyes and smiled, stating simply, "My Jesus mercy, praise be Jesus Christ." And that was it. The demons had gone. Anna was back to normal. I can imagine that everyone in that room was so relieved, but I'm sure they probably all had some kind of anxiety that they could potentially have come back, but it didn't. Anna returned to her normal life, obviously not straight away. Not everything sort of went back to normal initially. It obviously gradually took a while for Anna to start to go back to her normal self and to live her normal life. But over the years, she was getting there. 4 months after Anna had left the convent, she actually returned to basically thank everyone that was there and to praise them all for their hard work. And Anna went back to her home and went back to live a somewhat normal life. It's unsure of like when she died. However, I do know that Risinger died at the age of 73, and after that, well, after the whole exorcism fiasco, he led a somewhat normal life as well. He went back to living in peace. And yeah, so it's a pretty somewhat positive ending. So that concludes this week's episode. Obviously, this is something very different to what I normally do. I do find these kind of stories really interesting. The fact that it was real. Obviously, because of how long ago, not everything is completely factually accurate, but the thesis is there. You know, the main overall story is real. And yeah, those kind of stories, cases, I do find super interesting because obviously it's nothing I ever really, it's nothing that I hear of like locally, like, you know, I've never heard anyone to be exorcised. So it's really interesting to get out of my comfort zone and hear something completely different, and it is really terrifying at the same time. But yeah, I wanted to do something like this, something a bit paranormal. Obviously it's spooky season, and these kind of cases are what some of the greatest horror movies are based upon. So I wanted to bring that to you guys. So if you've heard of this story before, I have heard of it before, obviously researching it. I heard of it quite a while ago, and it's always sort of been at the back of my mind, but I finally decided, because obviously it's spooky season, I would cover this case. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I will be back within a couple of days with another episode of my spooky season. So that is it for today, and stay safe, stay spooky. Bye guys.